Now from Fox.
And that's why yesterday, on Tuesday I should say, I announced the $500 million extra package of development aid on top of the £100 million we've already given. Other countries, our friends and allies, are working with us to do much more.
Does the Prime Minister agree that the international order as envisaged in the Atlantic Charter of 1941 has been the most successful in the history of freedom and democracy? And as one of the architects of that order, we have a special responsibility to defend it. And whilst today's sanctions are extremely welcome, it cannot just be economic measures. We need a fundamental review of our military capability, including revisiting the integrated review, whose assumptions may now be out of date.
Mr. Speaker, the integrated review begins with the assertion that the most important area for our national security is the Euro-Atlantic area, as I believe I said to the honourable gentleman opposite on Tuesday, and that remains fundamental, and that's why we've continued with the investment that we have in NATO. We're the second biggest funder of NATO, as the honourable gentleman knows. But he's my right honourable friend knows. But he's right in what he says about what's at stake. This is about the whole idea of that wonderful thing that was so inspiring when some of us were young, of a Europe whole and free, that fantastic revolution that happened in 1989 and 1990 when communism fell, Mr. Speaker. It was a great moment for humanity, and we mustn't allow it to slip through our fingers.
Clive Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to say, on behalf of the people of Norwich, that we show our solidarity with the people of Ukraine. But warm words will not defend the Ukrainian people. I've been speaking to people who have been liaising with Ukrainian trade unions, people who've been fighting privatisation and wage cuts. But they say one thing, that they will not run from their homes. They will defend their families. Those people need to be able to defend themselves. I support the Prime Minister's assertion that we will be providing more defensive capabilities for that end. But let me say one thing, Prime Minister and Mr. Speaker. Will you agree, Prime Minister, that we must have an end to this by a negotiated settlement and not by an escalation of military means?
Mr. Speaker, I think the whole House, everybody in the world would want President Putin to have chosen the path of negotiation. He had that moment, and that's why, if you remember, we had that discussion in this House on Tuesday about that perilous moment which we all discussed. He had that opportunity. I'm afraid he's missed it. He's chosen the path of overwhelming violence and destruction, and I'm afraid that puts us on a very, very different course, and we have to accept that reality.
David Davis.
Everybody will wholeheartedly support the Prime Minister's sanctions, hopefully against all 140 Russian oligarchs that support Putin and against all the major banks. The Prime Minister also described the Russian state as a pariah state. And he's right, because they have broken international criminal law on a major scale. Can we actually implement our view of the pariah state by ensuring that everybody involved in that decision, if they leave Russia to go abroad, face international criminal sanctions wherever they go?
Good point. I thank my right honourable friend, and that is exactly what we can now do, thanks to the measures that this House has passed.
Neil Hamby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning we woke to the worst possible news, and I make no apology in hoping for a diplomatic solution. However, my party and I condemn the escalating Russian aggression. This is a fluid and developing situation, but we are now in uncharted territory. I can update the House that whilst there have been calls in this place for Alex Salmond to cease broadcasting on Russia Today, negotiations have obviously been happening in the background, and I can confirm that he has suspended broadcasting on Russia Today. But we must prepare We must prepare for the worst. And I would ask the Prime Minister what strategy is he bringing forward to increase the capacity of North Sea oil and gas so that we can support ourselves and EU member states and protect our people from a further increase in the cost of living.
Mr. Speaker, I must say I disagree profoundly with what he has had to say about negotiating now. I don't think that option is open to us. We must do our best to support and protect the people of Ukraine and working with our international friends and allies to constrict what Vladimir Putin can do. And on his point about Russia today, Mr. Speaker, I simply observe that the former leader of the Scottish Nationalist Party is his leader. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. His leader. I understand the pleas he entered in defence and mitigation. They don't seem to cut much ice with me.
Sir Graham Brady.
I wasn't standing.
Steve Crabb.
Steve Crabb is the name.
Mr. Speaker, I strongly welcome the further set of sanctions announced by the Prime Minister this evening, and we look forward to further steps being taken in the days ahead and not being held back by perhaps some of the slower moving members of the alliance in Europe. But does the Prime Minister agree with me that if sanctions are really to bite on Putin and his gangster government, then inevitably it will mean cost and inconvenience to UK economic interests, but that cost and inconvenience will be of as nothing compared to what the people of Ukraine are going through, and we stand with them this evening.
Yes, I'm afraid my honourable friend is right. It will mean cost. It will mean inconvenience. It will mean difficulty for us in the UK. But that will be a price worth paying, Mr. Speaker, for defeating the objectives of Vladimir Putin and showing that aggression does not pay.
Diana Johnson.
Dame Diana Johnson.
Could I just follow up on the question from the Honourable Member for the Isle of Wight about the Combating Kleptocracy cell in the National Crime Agency, and just seek from the Prime Minister a view whether additional powers will be required for the National Crime Agency and additional resources for them to do their work.
I thank her very much. They will, of course, they have plenty of existing statute, but the additional powers that they will have, amongst other things, will be the ability to peel back the facade of ownership, which I think will be extremely valuable.
Jonathan Ginocchia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whilst this terrible, appalling incident is, of course, directly the cause of Russia, I think it's appropriate that we also recognise that over the last 14 years, the UK, the EU, the US collectively have not been attentive to Russia in the way that we should. Can my right honourable friend now say that whatever happened in the past, moving forward, we are not going to let Russia fall between our fingers again?
Mr. Speaker, I think the lesson of 2014 is that the whole of the West failed to respond in the way that we should. And when a sovereign country was invaded and part of that country was occupied, I'm afraid it was quite wrong that we tried to manage the situation with the various diplomatic processes that we did, which in the end produced absolutely nothing except finally this catastrophic invasion today. We have to learn a bitter lesson, Mr. Speaker, about how to deal with Vladimir Putin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with the Prime Minister that it seems like the curtain has now come down on that era that began in 1989, and we've lived in an era of change since then. This now feels like a change of era. In this new era, the permissive environment that we created for the Kremlin's quartermasters to live, to invest, and to party in London, sometimes with the Prime Minister himself, that must now come to an end. So let me ask the Prime Minister this. Will he undertake to ensure that every visa issued to a Russian dual national is now reviewed, and where proximity to President Putin is proven, that citizenship should be stripped away.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we are doing that, though I think it is. I just think it's worth the House remembering the point that I made the other day. Not every Russian is a bad person, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the package of sanctions the Prime Minister has set out? And whilst I understand why it's not been possible to suspend Russia from the SWIFT payment system at this stage, can I ask what work we're doing with our European allies to offer them reassurance so that eventually we can get to a position when they can be suspended, because that is by far and away the biggest thing that will isolate the Russian economy.
My honourable friend is spot on. The biggest thing would be if everybody stopped taking Russian hydrocarbons. But SWIFT is extremely important, and it's a Belgian company, as I'm sure the House knows. We're raising it. We're trying to make progress with our friends, but for obvious reasons, it has to be done in unison.
Stuart M. MacDonald.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. This morning I spoke with friends in Kyiv who were leaving the country with their family, their children, and we've all seen the scenes from the capital of cars trying to get out. So I send my deepest thanks to the embassy team there who are doing all they can to support people. But can I ask the Prime Minister about two areas of support for Ukraine: economic support and continuing support for defensive capability? Will both of those areas of support intensify, and can he assure the House, I see the Foreign Secretary telling me so, but can he assure the House that the government will continue the deepest possible conversations with the government in Ukraine to ensure that no matter the assault that comes to it from Vladimir Putin, we will be supporting them in a deeply meaningful sense?
Yes, on that last point, the answer is certainly yes, Mr. Speaker. And just for instance, the other day I was looking at two British minesweepers being refitted in Rosyth, as I'm sure he knows, which are due to go to Ukraine. The question will be access, Mr. Speaker. That's what it all depends on.
Sir Robert Butland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's crystal clear from this act of naked aggression that Putin doesn't seek Finlandisation on his borders. He seeks at best to recreate a Belarus in the south, or at worst to dismember the sovereign state of Ukraine. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that that does mean that we need to build upon the outcome of our integrated defence review? We do need to think differently about Eastern Europe from the past. And then at home, with his announcement on bringing forward economic crime measures, it seems that there is a consensus in this House that could allow us to bring forward emergency legislation to bring those important measures to really hit those people hard and hit them now.
Speaker, I think that is clearly the will of the House, and it is the will of the government, and that's why we'll be taking those important measures, bringing them forward on Monday.
Shanara Ali.
Mr. Speaker, my thoughts are with the Ukrainian people at this time. And while I welcome the sanctions the Prime Minister's announced today, can he update the House on whether he plans to sanction the major state-owned Russian banks such as Sberbank and Gazprom Bank and the non-state bank Alpha Bank? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Ukrainian POW chapel at Lockerbie in my constituency is a focal point for the Ukrainian diaspora in Scotland, and prayers are being said there for their fellow countrymen. But what Ukrainians in the UK have identified being grateful for the military support that has already...
And we've been listening to the UK Parliament there as they talk about their new sanctions against Russia there, with the big one, freezing assets of all Russian banks there in the UK. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that for you right here on Live Now from Fox. So much moving parts here, unfortunately, because of this invasion that happened early this morning, local time there in Ukraine. Hi, everyone. Mike Pace here. Thanks so much for joining us here today on Live Now from Fox. We really do appreciate it. And live look here at the White House. We are expecting the president now to be speaking in the next 30 minutes to discuss new sanctions against Russia and really just give an update on a world perspective from the White House. So we'll be taking that as soon as it happens here for you right here. But I want to go and continue, obviously, to talk about this whole crisis that we are seeing right now and bring in a special guest, a friend here of Live Now from Fox, Jacob Lassin, ASU Russian Studies scholar. Thank you so much again for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And unfortunately, you know, we were talking earlier this week, and it's just something how fast 24 hours can change things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me. This is obviously the worst case scenario that we were thinking of, and unfortunately, it's come to pass.
Yeah, so I first want to get your take here, because you were just recently in Moscow, and what was your take when you, last night here, Arizona time, what were you thinking when you saw the images happening